Hello everybody, Keith here again. Somebody asked for a tour of my collection. I've had a couple of goes at this before and never really managed to get a decent result. So what I thought I would do this time is start off with a general look at the main area, which is our conservatory, or one end of our conservatory. And then bring stuff down onto that table and try and bring them, have a look at things individually. I don't just keep orchids, I've started keeping air plants as well, and I've got 7 altogether if you include all the bits of Spanish moss, which he sized a couple of bits and is now hanging off that Yucca elephantiapes. Believe it or not, that thing, which is probably 7 foot high overall, when we moved in here back in 2002, it used to sit on the windowsill in the corner over there. Now, just to get the silly out of the way first, that character is a mole with a miner's helmet on, because when I was working in the last few years, I was actually a mining engineer, so that is, I've named him Morris the miner. So, there's one orchid on there which we'll look at in a minute, and most of the others in here are on that rack. And that's an IKEA rack, I can't remember which one it is, but Danny, Miss Orchid Girl, bought one and said how great it was, and I thought that's good. And it proved itself really useful last winter. Not so much for orchids. You can see everything's on there, bits of plant pots and fertilisers and all sorts of stuff. But if you look over here, which is our dining table which we use in the conservatory, we've got a few plants on the back. There's a clivia on the right, a couple of Christmas cactus, an epiphyllum, and something which I think is called a devil's vine or golden potus or some such. And we used to cover that in plants, bringing in from the outside. And with that rack, I didn't need to. Now, it's going to be a bit trickier this year because I've got a lot more orchids. But some of those are going to have to come out. I mean, the Vanda in that last jar is going to have to come out. It's going to be too cold in here for it. But some of them, like my Nobile types, you can see the big white one, the one I call my IKEA dendrobium. That's surprisingly where I got it from last year. That's a big beast. That must be well over 2 feet 60 centimetres high on this year's cane, which is just terminated. Grown ever so well, that has this year, so we should get a nice display of flowers, hopefully. Anyway, we'll come back to those in detail later on. So that's a quick look. I'm not going to start going into the kitchen and the front room and the bedrooms and what have you with all the other plants and things. I mean, we've got a few down here. There's another clivia, which is a offset from the one over there. Some more air plants over here. But basically, apart from that, and these aloe vera, which we keep having to trim and get rid of bits because they get too big. But anyway, we'll call this bit quits, and we'll then start off looking at some of the plants individually. Plant number 1. As far as the orchids go, there's a Sarracenia in the background, but plant number 1 as far as the orchids are concerned is I think my most recent purchase. This is Bulbophyllum Memoria Karen MacDonald. It says it's a cross between Bailey and Coetzea, whatever, I'm not sure. Star-shaped pale yellow flowers with a burgundy lip, minimum of 12 centigrade. So that's going to be okay in here over the winter. Now when I bought it, it had 4 new growths, all of which had their leaves closed. That opened first, and then this one, and today that one's opened. Actually there's 5, because you've got that one there which is open and this one which hasn't yet. Now this is not doing too bad. It's in a pot which Sarah Ritterhausen of Burnham makes. It's the only holy clay pot I've got. And when I bought this from her, I was chatting with them about keeping it and getting as much advice as I could. And they suggested that this would work because these like to be wet, or at least well damp a lot of the time, but they do like to dry out as well. So they don't want to be soggy, but they want to be damp. So if you've got this, what you've got that in the middle, you've got very water retentive material. Around the outside you've got bark, and then you've got a holy clay pot. So there's lots of ventilation. The outside dries quite well. It pulls moisture from the middle and stops things rotting. Now I don't know what or whether I need to do anything with these pseudo bulbs. You can see there's I don't know if it's the way it's been potted or just the way it's grown, but you can see that this is growing vertically, and we've got a couple of growths coming off that where we've got lots of roots, but they're kind of up in the air. But that one, for example, is heading towards the bark, so I think that's reasonably okay. So that's all up in the lap of the gods, but if I get 5 flower spikes in the near future, I shall be somewhat over the moon. Okay, that's that one. Next group. Next group, sort of Oncidium types. Seem to do okay. That's a white twinkle, and that's a red twinkle. Now I bought those at the East Midlands Orchid Society show from Lawrence Hobbs. They were out of flower, so whether they are what the labels say we'll start to find out quite soon. Now this one, the white one, the pseudo bulbs were very, very dehydrated. I didn't know enough about them to know that that's what they were, or I probably wouldn't have bought it. I repotted it virtually straight away and it's gone berserk. There are a lot of new growths on there, but none of them have actually developed into pseudo bulbs yet, so this has got a little way to go before it will flower for me. But it's doing very well. I don't know why some of those leaves have become corrugated. 1 or 2 of my plants seem to have done that, and I'm not quite sure, because it's only odd leaves. So why that's just the odd pseudo bulb, I'm not really sure. Now this is supposed to be a red one, Oncidium Twinkle Red. And this has got, it had 3 new growths. One of them, something happened to it, I don't know what, probably before I got it, but I don't know how well you'll see this. But there's there's sort of a hole been chewed out of the side of the pseudobulb. So that one doesn't appear to have got to a state where it wants to flower. But I've got a spike there and another spike over there. And I just noticed that this pseudobulb, the one that's not done any good, has pushed up a new growth. So there we are then, that's another new growth. So that is doing okay. I was a little bit concerned because there are some older pseudobulbs in this middle, and they started to die off, and I had a group of them die off very quickly, and I was quite sweaty, if I'm honest. But I took them off, and whatever it was seems to have been caught in time. This is quite a success story. I bought it last year as a rescue plant with a Zygopetalum, which we'll look at later on. And this is actually a Cattleya wildcat. I think it's rainbows, from the first flower spike that it put up. But it took it a lot longer to get going than the Zygopetalum, although both of them were in a very, very sad state. They had gone out of flower and they'd just been chucked to one side and not looked after. Not that garden centres ever look after them very much. So I've got two no ID plants, and they've both thrived really and flowered for me. I mean, you can see the amount of roots that this thing's put out off that pseudobulb, and this flower spike is motoring, it really is. Whereas the twinkle seems to have slowed down. I don't know whether that's because the temperatures have dropped over the last week or so. Although looking at it was a post on our Facebook group, the Rogers Orchid Facebook group, or actually a YouTube video, but somebody said that twinkle spikes can actually take quite a long time to get from that stage to actually flowering. But this, it flowered in the early part of this year, January, February time, and it's now the beginning of September. So, you know, this is obviously a plant that will flower whenever it gets the pseudobulb to the right state. The sunburn was last year. I put it outside. We went away for the weekend. I thought, well, rather than have them in this conservatory, which can get extremely hot if I'm not here to get the windows open, I put it outside, and instead of putting it where the sun comes around later in the day, I gave it full sun, and it absolutely crippled it. And virtually everything that went outside suffered as well. But it come through, and you can see with all those roots, I don't think there's any great problem with that. These two are the same plant, if you like. This is Cattleya Pacific. I think the sub-name is Sunspots, but there are several that look very, very similar. I bought this in flower not so very long ago from a friend who'd got some decent orchids from a warehouse that was trying to clear up. He runs a market stall, and I got 3 orchids for about 11 quid instead of about 45, which you'd normally be paying for this kind of thing. And I repotted it, found the roots were great, but that came off, and I wasn't altogether sure how well that was going to do, because it only had that old pseudobulb and this new one and a bit of a new growth. Well, that new growth has done very well, and you can see the roots going down into the pot, so I don't think that there's any doubt that that is going to do all right for me. When it will reflower, I don't know. I mean, there are two new growths. That one looks as if it might be starting to develop the pseudobulb. I don't think that one's quite as far forward. But those are my Oncidiums, or fairly close to Oncidiums. Two Brassia types, and something I'm no longer sure what it is. This one is another of those that I bought from my buddy with the market stall. It had Inca on the sleeve. I looked at the Inca website and they identified it as Sturbic Red, but it's practically speaking identical to one that Roger bought from Spiceotic Plants at the Welsh Orchid Festival, and that is not identified as Sturbic Red. And I know that Rachel of Duenza Gardens got a Sturbic Red which is much redder than this. This is very similar, but a dark maroon. It was in flower when I got it. The flowers lasted for a very, very, very long time. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that flower again. Now, it's putting out a new growth, but it's the oddest new growth I think I've ever seen. Let me take that label out so we can see it a bit better. It just looks untidy. But if you get in a bit closer, you'll see it doesn't look like one spike. It looks like several. I mean, there's one there, there's another one here, and it feels like there's one at the back, so I have no idea what this thing's doing. So it's going to be very interesting to wait and see. So whether it is Odontioda Sturbic Red or whether it's something else altogether, I don't know. But it seems to be doing okay. This one, which Steve Pask from East Midlands Orchid Society identified for me as Brassia Chieftain, is the first one that I got, first spider orchid I got. I mean, it quite literally stopped me in my tracks with the flowers at a garden centre. It came as a no idea initially, and it was just unlike anything I've ever seen. But having flowered, it took a very, very long time to do anything. It wasn't that big a plant. It put this out, and unlike some of the others where you get roots off the pseudobulb, the roots on this one come off the rhizome, and I was getting really quite worried there was something wrong with the plants that have got this dark colour on, which is not rot. There's no sign whatsoever that is softening. The only thing I can think of is it's some kind of almost like a tan, if you like, something related to the amount of sunlight it's been getting. It certainly hasn't been sunburnt at all this year, but eventually the roots came and it rebloomed and it looked gorgeous. And what was curious was that when I bought it, the flowers that were on that spike were not fragrant at all, and this one put out extra flowers. I think it was 5 instead of 3. And that wasn't fragrant until the last flower opened. And then I came down the next morning and the scent in the kitchen nearly blew my head off. And now, having flowered, we've got a lovely strong new growth. Not that fast, same as before, not that fast, but you know, we know now that that is happy in my conditions. You can probably read the label, but is there anybody that doesn't have a shale-up Tolkien? I mean, these are ridiculously vigorous. You can see the amount of roots it put out on this one. It does it every time, and you've got a new growth there. There's a nub down there. There's another new growth here, and again putting out loads and loads of roots, and you can see they're going down into the pot, so that'll be flowering before long. So this is a plant which is very, very happy, and it's going to flower again. It flowered not all that long ago, so this is another one that flowers when it's happy that the pseudobulb has matured sufficiently, but it's not that mature. When you look at this pseudobulb here, and look at the one behind it, and look at some of the others, that's not particularly mature. But never mind. I don't mind that. I'll happily take all the flowers that thing will give me, because it's gorgeous, of course. Paphiopedilums and Coelogynes. That is the first Paph I bought. It's one of the, some people call them bulldog Paphs. Some people call them American hybrid. They're a complex hybrid. They're quite a big one. They're a doddle to grow. They really are an absolute doddle to grow. Because if you treat them like a Phalaenopsis, they will do absolutely fine. I bought this in February 2016 when we went to that year's Kew orchid event, and it's reflowered for me every year since, for better or worse. 2 years ago, or sorry, last year I should say, it put 3 spikes up. You only get 1 flower on each spike. Last year I only got 1, but you can now see that it's got 2 directions of growth. The middle is starting to die back. That one and that one have already flowered, so they're going to die back. So next time it's repotted, that'll have to be split, even if I put everything back in the same pot. But it is doing very well. There's quite a number of new fans growing in on that side. And another load of new fans growing on that side as well. So that plant is going to be okay for a few years yet. As you will notice over the next few minutes, I do like the little paphs with mottled leaves. This was the first of those I bought, which was a Mordii. Again, I treated it exactly the same as a Phalaenopsis, except somebody said keep its feet wet, so I normally keep a little bit of water in the bottom. I let it pull that up and dry out, then put a little bit more in again. It seems to be doing fine. We've got a new fan there. There's a flowered one there, flowered one there. Around this side you've got a new growing fan there. So again, this is doing very nicely. This, in terms of the Paphiopedilums, is the last one that I bought. I bought this at the Hampton Court Flower Show this year from Vacheron Le Coffre, who were exhibiting there, and this one is Callosum var Sublaevi. which I thought was absolutely gorgeous, and it had 2 flowers on the same spike, which is unusual. Now this one has got 2 new spikes growing there and growing very quickly, so I'm really chuffed with that. Now then, 2 more paphs. This is Delenatii vinicola, and this is the standard Delenatii. You can see, I suspect, because having less of the dark coloration, you get better photosynthesis. Easy for you to say. Better photosynthesis because you can get more light. So it's certainly growing faster. But that's quite nice. This was a smaller plant when I got it. It's put 2 leaves up since, and seems to be doing okay, but neither of them is doing ever such a lot just at the moment. Now, this one is a frag, Humboldtii. When I bought it, it was an absolutely magnificent plant with about 5 new growths on it, and it should have been absolutely spectacular. And I got it very, very badly sunburnt. I thought I'd killed it. And it's taken 2 years to get anywhere at all. It is growing. It is growing, but it is not a fast grower. And the last time I repotted it, the rhizome split, so I've got 1 piece there and another piece there. They're both doing okay, they're both doing something, and they're still growing, but again, it's not doing ever such a lot just at the moment. Back the right way round. Coelogynes. Coelogyne fimbriata. Bought this as a small plant from Burnham's last year, almost roughly a year ago. Turned out to be 3 little pieces in 1 small pot. 1 of them died. The other 2 have kept growing, but they've all gone in one direction, so I need to have it out before very much longer and trim this lot back and move it back over. I mean, it is doing okay. We've got a new growth there and a nice big pseudobulb, probably the biggest one that's grown since I've had it, but there's some down there that are getting swamped. So, you know, we have got some new growths, but it could, I suspect, do a bit better. This is Flacida. I bought this from a fellow member of the East Midlands Orchid Society in flower. And it's put up 2 new growths off this bulb, which was the one that was in flower, and it's also put up 2 more growths at the back from 2 different pseudobulbs. What this is going to do, I don't know. It is actually accelerating now that things are cooling off. So I think this is going to have to stay in here, whereas I think the paphs and the frag are going to have to be moved into somewhere a little bit warmer. This one's a bit of a pain. This is Coelogyne cristata var alba, another one that I got from Burnham's at the same time as the fimbriata, as a small plant. it was a very small plant. It put out 2 growths last year. This one was badly wrapped in the sheath when I got it, and it never really did a lot. The leaves are never very good. That one put 2 full leaves out, but they got brown tips. This put out 2 new growths. One of them died almost straight away. This one hasn't achieved anything at all. But it's now put that one out, which does look a lot better. This one is actually forming its pseudobulb, and we have a root, and now we've got another spike. Now, whether that's going to be a flowering spike, whether that's going to be another new growth, remains to be seen. I've no idea. The problem with this one is the way it grows. The ordinary cristata has smaller rounded pseudobulbs, and they grow on a very, very short rhizome. This has large, much larger, still taller pseudobulbs, and grows on a much longer rhizome, as you can see on these. So it spreads all over everywhere. And I genuinely don't know how on earth I'm going to keep it in the long term, because it's going to end up in a bucket, and I don't know where I'm going to put it. And that's this group. I've only got 2 Cattleya types, and if I'd only had one, I'd probably have none. This was the first one that I bought. I got this at RHS Wisley in their garden centre in June last year. It's white. Nothing special to write home about, but it's pure white. Produces unifoliate and bifoliate growth, but now mostly bifoliate. I've no idea what it is, but the blessed thing won't flower. When I got it last year, it put out 2 new growths, one on each lead, one there and one there, which produced a unifoliate, bifoliate and a unifoliate. None of them did anything, but they were not as big as the previous cane by a long way. Now this year it's done considerably better. That was the first new growth that it made. Hasn't flowered, there's no sign of a sheath down there, just the very top of the cane is all I've ever had. And it put up one on this side. And although it's not as big as the other one, it's bigger than all the previous growths on that lead. So this is doing okay, and it's putting plenty of roots out and all the rest of it. And much to my surprise, it's now put out another new growth on each lead. So we've now got that one on the smaller lead, and this one on the stronger one. Now this is rattling away. It's going to be at least as big as the one that preceded it. Will it flower? Well, I think your guess is as good as mine. Can't see any sign of a sheath in there yet, if it's going to. If these don't flower, I think that might well go into an Orchid Society auction or something like that, because if I can't flower it, perhaps somebody else can. The one that's kind of got me thinking, well, perhaps I can grow Cattleyas after all, is this one. I bought this from a speaker who came to the society, and this is, well, it was Laleo Cattleya. I believe it's now Cattleyanthe Secret Love. it put up one new growth, put up a sheath and put up 2 flowers. Unfortunately it nosedived off the top deck and knocked off the better of the 2 flowers. This one has no petals, but it is quite a pretty one. It's pink with a purple lip, which is quite a pretty one. Now that new growth was a very good one, really good one, and certainly a similar size to the previous one. Unifoliate, some of it is bifoliate, as you can see. Now we've now got another new growth down here. We've got lots of roots. We've got roots coming from further back off the previous cane, which was there before I got it. There was a new growth on that, but it's already died off. So it doesn't look like that side's going to do any good. But we can see how we go. Be nice to get something like that. So at least this one will flower under my conditions. So this is definitely a keeper. The only problem with it, as you can see off the back of that flower, they both produce vast amounts of happy sap. So when you're handling them, you have to go and wash your hands afterwards because you're stuck up to the ear hole. Strictly speaking, I've got some more Cattleyas in this jar. I bought these from the Ridlington School project at the Bournemouth Orchid Society 60th anniversary show down in Bournemouth earlier this year, March I think it was, end of March. And for £3, oh yes, 31st of March, I've got it written on the label. For £3 you could reflask something that wanted doing, put it into a brand new flask, and it was either a Bulbophyllum or Cattleya tenebrosa, and I looked at or of the ones that they'd got, the Cattleya tenebrosa and the Bulbophyllum were the ones that I thought I could grow. Now they're growing okay down in the bottom. Whether they're Cattleyas, I'm honestly not sure, because none of my other, neither of those 2 Cattleyas that you've seen earlier on have 3 leaves on the stem. Some of them have 2, some of them have got 3 with 2 at the top and 1 lower down. Whether that's a seedling trait, I don't know. I can't see very well for the condensation on the outside. I suspect this is going to have to come into the house. It's been in here pretty much since March, but it is going to get colder. But I don't know how well we can see what's going off in there. But these are going to have to be a lot bigger before they come out of here. That's the end of the first part of my orchid tour. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in part 2.